Part 5. A New Beginning. The images from the Kepler junction spread across the Valthesian Empire like a wave washing away sandcastles. Citizens watched in stunned silence as news networks showed the disabled fleet, the human rescue operations, and Admiral Sungmin's public statement admitting he had been wrong. The government collapsed within days. The High Council, already weakened by the exposure of Quan Ho's conspiracy, could not survive the revelation that they had nearly started a war based on lies and fear. Protests filled every major city. People demanded change, truth, and accountability. Within a week, the council voted to dissolve itself and call for democratic elections, the first in Valthesian history. Tae Sung, now released from all charges and celebrated as a hero, found himself at the center of the reform movement. He didn't want political power, but people trusted him. He had risked everything to prevent a war. That meant something. "I never wanted to be a politician," he told Hee-jin as they watched the election results come in. The reformers had won by a landslide. The old guard, the generals and bureaucrats who had built their careers on managing human artifacts, were swept from power. "Sometimes we don't get to choose our role in history," Hee-jin replied. "You did what needed to be done. Now you have to help build what comes next." The first act of the new Valthesian government was to send an official apology to the Terran Concordat. It acknowledged that the empire had been built on deception, that they had scavenged human technology while claiming to honor a dead civilization. The apology offered no excuses and asked for no forgiveness. It simply stated the truth. President Yoon Seo accepted the apology and invited Tae Sung to New Terra to negotiate a formal treaty. The negotiations took 3 months. Tae Sung led the Valthesian delegation, while Ambassador Dong Hyun represented humanity. They worked through complicated questions of territory, technology sharing, and mutual defense. But the core of the treaty was simple: recognition, respect, and cooperation. The Treaty of New Terra included what humans called the Never Again Clause. Both civilizations agreed to intervene if they discovered any species engaging in genocide, slavery, or the extermination of pre-spaceflight civilizations. The galaxy's age of unchecked expansion was over. 2 species had come to the brink of war and chosen peace instead. Now they would work together to ensure others made the same choice. "This will make us unpopular," Tae Sung warned during the negotiations. "Other species won't appreciate being told how to behave. Then they'll learn to live with our disapproval," Dong Hyun replied. "We watched from the shadows for 300 years. We saw what happens when powerful species face no consequences for their cruelty. That ends now." The treaty was signed on New Terra, in a ceremony attended by representatives from both civilizations. Tae Sung and Yoon Seo stood together before crowds from both species, their hands clasped in friendship. "Today marks the beginning of a new era," Yoon Seo announced. "An era where survival doesn't require domination, where strength is measured not by how many we conquer, but by how many we lift up, where 2 species who had every reason to be enemies chose to be friends instead." The cultural exchange began almost immediately. Human art, music, and literature flooded into the empire. Valthesians were particularly fascinated by human concepts of resilience and adaptation. They read stories of the Exodus, the Great Sacrifice, and the centuries of hidden survival. These stories resonated deeply with people who were now questioning their own history. Dr. Bora established the first joint human Valthesian university on New Terra. Students from both species studied together, learning each other's sciences, philosophies, and histories. The university became a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. Hee-jin accepted a position as an exchange officer, teaching Valthesian cadets about human military tactics. She was surprised to find that most of her students were more interested in how humanity had avoided war than how they had won the battle at Kepler Junction. "We've spent our entire civilization focused on military strength," one young cadet told her. "But you showed us that real strength is knowing when not to fight. That's harder than any battle." Tae Sung and Captain Ji-woo became unlikely friends. They co-authored a book called The Species That Chose Survival Over Glory. It became a bestseller across both civilizations and eventually among other species who heard about it. The book told the story of humanity's exodus from the perspective of both humans and Valthesians, showing how different perspectives could lead to understanding. Admiral Sungmin retired from military service, but he didn't fade away. He worked with Admiral Min-soo to establish joint military academies where officers from both species trained together. The curriculum focused not just on tactics and strategy, but on ethics and restraint. I almost started a war because I was afraid, Sungmin told a class of new cadets. I let fear blind me to the truth. That's the real lesson here. Fear makes us see enemies where we should see potential friends. Courage means choosing understanding over assumption. News of the treaty spread beyond the Empire's borders. Dozens of other species, some oppressed by larger powers, others simply curious about the humans who had returned, sought contact with the Concordat. Some wanted protection, others wanted trade. All of them wanted to understand how two species had nearly gone to war and instead built a friendship. President Yun Seo addressed the galactic community through a broadcast sent to every known civilization. For 300 years, humanity watched from the shadows, she said. We saw the best and worst of what species could be. We saw kindness and cruelty, cooperation and conquest. Now we return to offer you a choice. Join us in building a galaxy based on mutual respect and protection of the vulnerable. Or continue as you have been, and know that we will oppose cruelty wherever we find it. We won't conquer you, but we won't let you conquer others either. The response was mixed. Some species welcomed humanity's return and sought diplomatic relations. Others resented the implicit threat and accused humans of hypocrisy. A few chose to isolate themselves rather than accept human interference. But slowly, carefully, the galaxy began to change. A year after the treaty signing, New Terra hosted a ceremony to unveil a monument commemorating first contact. Dignitaries from 20 species attended, though the Valthesians and humans were the guests of honor. The monument showed two hands reaching toward each other across a field of stars. One human, one Valthesian. The inscription was written in both languages. They expected to find ruins. They found hope. Taesung stood before the monument with Jiwoo beside him. They had both changed since that first tense meeting on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil. Taesung was no longer just a military commander. He was a leader of his people, helping guide them through the painful process of confronting their past. Jiwoo had been promoted to admiral, but she spent more time on diplomatic missions than military ones. Do you think it will last? Jiwoo asked quietly. The peace, I mean. There are still people in both our civilizations who don't trust each other. Peace is never permanent, Taesung replied. It's something we have to choose every day. But yes, I think it will last. Because we've both learned what the alternative costs. They watched as children from both species played together beneath the monument, chasing each other and laughing without any awareness of the historical significance of their friendship. A human child tripped and fell, and a young Valthesian helped her up without hesitation. It was a small moment, meaningless in isolation, but it represented everything both civilizations hoped to build. That evening, Taesung and Jiwoo stood on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. Ships from dozens of worlds hung in orbit around New Terra, their presence a testament to how quickly things had changed. My grandmother stayed behind during the exodus, Jiwoo said suddenly. Heejin told me about showing you the memorial wall. My grandmother's name is there. She was a teacher. She volunteered to stay on Mars to maintain the schools, to make sure the deception looked real. She died when the infrastructure collapsed. I'm sorry, Taesung said, and meant it. She made a choice, Jiwoo continued. She chose to sacrifice herself so billions of others could survive and build something better. For 300 years, I wondered if that sacrifice was worth it, if hiding instead of fighting was cowardice or wisdom. Now I know. She died so we could have this moment, so human and Valthesian children could play together without fear, so two species could meet as equals instead of conqueror and conquered. She turned to face Taesung. Your people built an empire on the ruins of our old colonies. You could have kept lying. You could have tried to destroy us when you discovered the truth. Instead, you risked everything to find a better way. That's what my grandmother died for. That's what 3 billion people sacrificed themselves for, the hope that when the moment came, someone would choose peace. Taesung looked out at the assembled ships representing species from across the galaxy. Some were there because they believed in the new order. Others were there simply to observe. But all of them had come because two species had shown that change was possible. We didn't just prevent a war, he said softly. We started something bigger. A movement. An idea. Part 4. The brink of War Lieutenant Hyejin stood in her cell aboard the Eternal Vigil, counting the hours since she had helped Taesung escape from prison. She knew the guards would come for her eventually. The question was whether they would come to execute her or to question her. When the door finally opened, she expected Valthesian soldiers. Instead, Taesung himself entered, looking exhausted but determined. How? She asked, surprised. The prison guards weren't loyal to Kwan Ho, Taesung explained. When I showed them evidence of the false flag attack, they let me go. Some of them are as tired of the lies as I am. Come on, we don't have much time. They ran through the corridors of the ship. Taesung had managed to gather a small group of officers who believed in peace. Together, they had taken control of the Eternal Vigil while most of the crew slept. It was a desperate plan, but it was all they had. Where are we going? Heejin asked as they reached the communications center. To broadcast the truth, Taesung said. Kwan Ho's attack on Reach's Edge was meant to look like a legitimate military operation, but we have evidence that it was a false flag designed to start a war. If we can get this information to both our governments, we might stop this before it goes too far. They worked quickly, uploading the stolen files to every communication channel they could access. The evidence was damning. Financial records showing how Kwan Ho had moved weapons and ships without proper authorization. Communications between conspirators discussing the false flag operation. Testimony from officers who had been uncomfortable with their orders. Within an hour, the truth was spreading across both the Empire and the Concordat. The public reaction was immediate and explosive. On SciFiPrime, citizens flooded the streets demanding Kwan Ho's arrest. The general tried to claim the documents were fake, but too many people recognized the signatures and codes. The High Council had no choice but to order his detention, but the damage was already done. Admiral Sung Min, one of Kwan Ho's most loyal supporters, had already mobilized a fleet. 200 warships, nearly a third of the Empire's military, prepared to jump to Concordat space. Sung Min believed everything Kwan Ho had told him. He was convinced that humans were playing a long game, preparing to subjugate the Empire. He saw Taesung's evidence as more deception, another trick to make the Valthesians lower their guard. They murdered our people at Reach's Edge, Sung Min told his officers, ignoring the fact that it was Valthesians who had attacked first. They've infiltrated our society for centuries. They've been preparing for this moment. If we don't strike now with force and commitment, they'll destroy us. The imperial government tried to recall the fleet, but Sung Min ignored the orders. He had convinced himself that the High Council had been compromised by human agents. In his mind, he was the last hope for Valthesian survival. The fleet jumped toward human space. On New Terra, President Yoon Seo received the news with grim acceptance. She had hoped for peace, had worked toward it, but she had also prepared for this possibility. 300 years of preparation had made humanity ready for war, even if they didn't want it. Mobilize the defense fleet, she ordered. Send Admiral Minsu to intercept. And make it clear to all ships, disable, don't destroy. We're not murderers. Admiral Minsu commanded the Concordat Defense Force from her flagship, the Determination. She was a veteran of dozens of simulation wars, trained on historical data and tactical analysis. She had studied every major battle in human history and learned from them all. But this would be her first real combat command. 80 ships against 200, her tactical officer noted. The odds aren't good. The odds are irrelevant, Minsu replied. We have better technology, better training, and the advantage of fighting for our homes. But more importantly, we're not trying to kill them. We're trying to teach them. There's a difference. The two fleets met at a strategic point between the two civilizations called the Kepler Junction. It was an empty region of space, far from any inhabited worlds. If there was to be a battle, at least it wouldn't endanger civilians. Admiral Sung Min looked at his tactical displays and felt confident. His fleet outnumbered the humans more than 2 to 1. His ships were built from proven designs tested over decades. He expected the humans to retreat or surrender. Instead, they held position and waited. All ships attack formation, Sung Min ordered. Target their command ship. Show them we mean business. The Valthesian fleet advanced, weapons charging. They launched the first volley of missiles, hundreds of them, enough firepower to obliterate a planet's surface. The human point defense systems activated. Laser batteries and kinetic interceptors filled the space between the fleets with deadly precision. 95% of the missiles never reached their targets. The few that did struck energy shields that absorbed the impacts without failing. Sung Min stared at his displays in shock. That's impossible. No one has point defense that accurate. We do now. Minsu said calmly over an open channel. Admiral Sungmin, this is your only warning. Stand down your fleet or we will disable your ships. We don't want to hurt anyone, but we will defend ourselves. You're bluffing, Sungmin replied. You can't possibly have the firepower to stop us all. Minsu sighed. I tried. All ships execute Defensive Protocol 7. Disable only. No casualties. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The human ships moved with impossible precision, their propulsion systems allowing maneuvers that should have torn the vessels apart. They darted through the Valthesian formation like sharks through a school of fish. Their weapons didn't aim for destruction. They targeted specific systems. Engine cores, weapon arrays, command centers, communication systems. Within 20 minutes, half the Valthesian fleet was drifting powerless. The ships weren't destroyed. Their crews were alive, but they were completely helpless. Sungmin watched in horror as his formation fell apart. Ships collided with each other, trying to evade the human vessels. Captains panicked and fired wildly, hitting their own allies more often than the enemy. It wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration of overwhelming superiority. Cease fire, Sungmin finally ordered, his voice hollow. All ships, cease fire. The human fleet stopped immediately, their weapons powering down. They held position around the disabled Valthesian ships like shepherds watching a flock. Minsu opened a channel to every ship in both fleets. Her face appeared on every display, calm and serious. Soldiers of the Valthesian Empire, she said, you came here believing we were a threat, that we wanted to conquer or destroy you. I hope what you've seen today proves otherwise. We could have destroyed your fleet. We could have killed everyone here, but we didn't because that's not who we are. She paused, letting her words sink in. 300 years ago, our ancestors made a choice. They could have stayed and fought species like yours. They might have won. But they asked themselves what kind of civilization they wanted to be. They chose peace over power. They chose survival over domination. They chose to build something worth defending rather than something built on conquest. You're watching your fleets now, Minsu continued. Disabled but intact. Your crews are alive. Your ships can be repaired. We're going to provide medical assistance to anyone who needs it. We're going to give you supplies and let you return home. All we ask is that you tell the truth about what happened here. Tell them that humanity doesn't want war, but we won't be victims ever again. Sungmin sat in his command chair, his entire worldview crumbling. Everything Kwanho had told him was wrong. The humans weren't bloodthirsty conquerors. They weren't seeking revenge. They were exactly what they claimed to be, survivors who wanted to be left in peace. Human rescue ships approached the disabled Valthesian vessels. They brought medical supplies, spare parts, and even food. The Valthesian crews, expecting execution or imprisonment, were shocked to receive help instead. On one of the disabled ships, a young Valthesian officer named Taimin watched human medics treating his wounded crewmates. They worked with the same dedication they would have shown their own people, asking nothing in return. Why are you helping us? He asked one of the medics. The human woman looked up from her patient. Because you're hurt. What other reason do we need? That simple answer changed everything for Taimin. He had been raised on stories of humanity's supposed fall, taught that they were weak and fragile. Now he saw the truth. They were strong precisely because they chose mercy when they could choose violence. Admiral Sungmin requested permission to come aboard the Determination. Minsu granted it, meeting him in a conference room without guards or weapons. Just two military leaders talking honestly. I was wrong, Sungmin admitted, about everything. Part 3. Fractures in the Empire. The news spread through the Valthesian Empire like fire through dry grass. Commander Taesung had sent his report to the High Council, but before they could decide how to handle it, someone leaked the information to the public networks. Within hours, every citizen of the Empire knew the truth. Humanity had not died in the Great Collapse. They had faked their extinction and built a new civilization in secret. The Empire fractured. On the streets of SciFiPrime, protesters gathered in massive crowds. Some carried signs celebrating humanity's return, calling them the elder species and demanding friendly relations. Others shouted that humans were a threat, that they would seek revenge for the empire building on their ruins. Still others demanded that the government bury the truth entirely and pretend the discovery never happened. In the High Council chambers, the arguments grew heated. This changes everything, said Councillor Yuri. a reformer who had always questioned the Empire's expansion policies. We must acknowledge that our entire civilization is built on a lie. We claim to honor humanity while scavenging their abandoned technology. Now we must face the truth and seek peace. General Quan Ho slammed his fist on the table. He was old for a Valthesian, his scales dulled by age but his mind still sharp. Peace? They lied to us for 300 years. They watched us from the shadows, infiltrated our society, studied our weaknesses. They're preparing for war and you want to invite them in? They had the capability to destroy us at any time, Taesung argued. He had been called before the council to explain his report. They chose not to. That speaks to their intentions. Or their patience, Quan Ho growled. Perhaps they were simply waiting until they had overwhelming force. Perhaps they're playing a long game and we're fools if we believe their peaceful words. The Supreme Chancellor, the nominal head of the council, raised his hand for silence. He was a political creature, skilled at reading the mood of the room. This council is divided. The public is divided. We need time to study the situation before making any decisions. We don't have time, Taesung said urgently. The humans know their secret is out. They're preparing for whatever comes next. If we hesitate, if we appear hostile, we might force them into action. Then what do you suggest? The Chancellor asked. Before Taesung could answer, an aide entered the chamber and whispered urgently to the Chancellor. The leader's expression went pale. It seems the decision has been made for us, the Chancellor announced. A human diplomatic ship has just entered our space. They're requesting permission to approach SciFiPrime. They say they have an ambassador who wishes to address the council. The room erupted in argument. Some demanded the ship be turned away. Others insisted they should hear what the humans had to say. Quan Ho demanded the ship be destroyed as a warning. In the end, political reality won. The reformers had enough support to force a vote, and the human ship was allowed to proceed. Ambassador Dong Hyun arrived 3 days later. He was a tall human with gray hair and calm eyes that missed nothing. He entered the council chamber without fear, flanked by 2 human guards who carried no visible weapons. Taesung noticed the guards moved with the precision of trained soldiers. These were not ceremonial escorts. Honored members of the High Council, Dong Hyun began, his voice clear and strong. I come before you to propose a simple arrangement. Recognition, cooperation, and mutual respect between our civilizations. We have no interest in your territory or your resources. We seek only to coexist peacefully in this galaxy. Why should we believe you? Quan Ho demanded. You deceived the entire galaxy for 3 centuries. We hid, Dong Hyun corrected. There's a difference. We never lied to you because we never spoke to you. We simply chose to be somewhere you would never look. As for why you should believe us now, let me show you something. He activated a holographic display. Images filled the air above the council table. They showed Valthesian military bases, fleet positions, communication networks, and defense systems. The detail was incredible, terrifying. For 300 years we've watched you, Dong Hyun said calmly. We know the location of every major military installation in your empire. We know your fleet composition, your supply chains, your communication protocols. We've had this information the entire time. If we wanted to attack, we could have crippled your civilization before you knew we existed. The council sat in stunned silence. But we didn't, Dong Hyun continued, because we're not conquerors. We're survivors. We made the hardest choice our species ever faced. We sacrificed billions of our people and abandoned our homeworld to avoid becoming what we saw you becoming. We chose peace over power. Now we're asking you to make the same choice. This is blackmail, Quan Ho said, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. This is honesty, Dong Hyun replied. You need to understand what you're dealing with. We don't want war, but if you force one, you will lose, quickly and completely. I'm here to offer you a better path. Over the next week, Dong Hyun negotiated with the council. The terms were surprisingly fair. The humans wanted formal recognition, technology exchange agreements, and open trade. They offered access to their medical advances and civilian technology. In return, they asked only that the Empire respect their territory and commit to a joint exploration. Treaty for uncharted space, but not everyone was convinced. General Quan Ho held secret meetings with like-minded military officers. He believed the humans were lying, that this was a trap designed to make the Empire lower its guard. He convinced a significant portion of the military that the only way to preserve Valthesian independence was to strike first. He began planning a false flag operation. Quan Ho arranged for a remote, Imperial colony to be attacked by ships using stolen military codes. The attack would be blamed on the humans, giving him the excuse he needed to launch a preemptive strike against the Terran Concordat. Tae Sung discovered the plot by accident. One of his former students, now serving under Quan Ho, came to him in the middle of the night with evidence. Computer files showing the plan, communications between conspirators, financial records proving weapons had been moved into position. "You have to stop him," the young officer pleaded. "General Quan Ho is going to start a war we cannot win. He's convinced himself that humanity is playing a trick, but I've studied their history. They're telling the truth. If we attack them, they'll destroy us." Tae Sung tried to take the evidence to the High Council, but Quan Ho's supporters moved first. He was arrested for treason before he could present his case. The charges were fabricated: conspiracy with foreign powers, betrayal of state secrets. They threw him in a military prison and sealed his communications. With Tae Sung out of the way, Quan Ho launched his attack. The target was Reach's Edge, a small human mining colony on the border of Concordat space. Quan Ho sent 12 warships under the command of a loyal captain. The orders were simple: destroy the colony and make it look like a legitimate military operation. Show the humans that the Empire would not be intimidated. Commander Jae Hyun was having breakfast with his family when the attack alarm sounded. He commanded the defense garrison at Reach's Edge, a force of 3 ships and 200 ground troops. His wife grabbed their children and ran for the emergency shelters while Jae Hyun sprinted to the command center. "Report," he snapped as he entered. 12. Valthesian warships dropping out of jump, his tactical officer reported. "They're not responding to hails. Weapons are hot." Jae Hyun felt his stomach drop. This was it. The war everyone feared. "All ships battle stations," he ordered. "Ground forces to defensive positions. Get everyone into the shelters, move." The Valthesian ships opened fire without warning. Their weapons tore into the mining facilities, destroying equipment and killing workers who hadn't reached safety in time. Jae Hyun's 3 ships rose to meet them, badly outnumbered but determined to buy time for the evacuation. The battle was brutal. Jae Hyun's ships used superior speed and maneuverability to stay alive, darting between the larger Valthesian vessels and striking at vulnerable points. They destroyed 2 enemy ships and damaged 3 others, but it wasn't enough. One of his ships was torn apart by a barrage of missiles. Another took heavy damage and had to retreat. Jae Hyun's flagship, the Morning Star, fought alone against the remaining Valthesian force. "Sir, shields at 20%, his engineer reported. "Weapons offline. We can't take another hit." Jae Hyun looked at his crew, young men and women who had trusted him to lead them. He couldn't let them die for nothing. "Activate the emergency beacon," he ordered. "Full power. Make sure it reaches the Concordat." Then he opened a channel to the Valthesian ships. "This is Commander Jae Hyun. I'm surrendering my vessel. We have wounded aboard. I'm asking for mercy under the laws of war." The Valthesian captain hesitated. Then, perhaps remembering his own honor, he agreed. Jae Hyun and his surviving crew were taken prisoner. But in doing so, he had accomplished something Quan Ho hadn't planned for. Several Valthesian soldiers, young and uncertain, saw how the humans treated their wounded, saw how they protected civilians, saw that these weren't monsters or threats, and some of them began to question what they had been told. Part 2, The Truth Revealed. The shuttle descended through New Terra's atmosphere, and Tae Sung pressed his face against the viewport like a child seeing space for the first time. Below him stretched a world that made SciFiPrime look primitive. Floating cities drifted among the clouds, held aloft by technology he could not identify. Vast forests covered the continents, interrupted only by gleaming urban centers that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. Orbital rings circled the planet, connected by elevator cables that stretched from ground to sky. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said Lieutenant Haijin, his human escort. She was younger than Captain Jiwoo, with an easy smile that made Tae Sung feel almost welcome. "New Terra was our first colony after the Exodus. We terraformed it over 2 centuries. No shortcuts, no environmental damage. We learned from old Earth's mistakes." "Old Earth?" Tae Sung repeated. "Your homeworld, the one you left behind." Heejin's smile faded. "The one we had to leave behind. Earth is still there in the old territories. Empty now. We sealed it before we left. No one gets in or out. It's a tomb for those who stayed to maintain the deception. The shuttle landed on a platform near the capital city. Tae-sung and his two aides followed Hee-jin through corridors filled with humans going about their daily lives. They stared at the Valthesians with curiosity but not fear. Children pointed and asked their parents questions. Tae-sung heard no hostility in their voices, only interest. "You're not afraid of us," Tae-sung observed. "Should we be?" Hee-jin asked. "You're three people with no weapons, surrounded by 40 billion humans. Besides, we've been watching your empire for 300 years. We know more about you than you know about yourselves." That thought unsettled Tae-sung more than he wanted to admit. They entered a large building that Hee-jin called the Historical Archive. Inside, Dr. Bora waited for them. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see through him. "Commander Tae-sung," she said, offering her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I'm told you want to understand how we survived. Come, I'll show you." Dr. Bora led them through halls filled with artifacts and holographic displays. She stopped at a massive wall covered in names. "Millions of names. These are the people who stayed behind," she explained. "They knew they would die. They accepted it. When we triggered the electromagnetic pulses that destroyed every human colony in known space, we also evacuated 90% of our population, but 10% remained. Scientists, soldiers, ordinary people who volunteered to maintain the illusion. 10%, Tae-sung breathed. That's billions of people. 3,400,000,000, Dr. Bora said precisely. They died in the collapse or in the chaos that followed. They died so the rest of us could escape to systems your scouts would never explore. Systems we had marked as hostile or worthless. We hid in plain sight, behind false data and misdirection. She moved to another display showing a map of the galaxy. Your people and others like you were expanding aggressively. We watched you encounter pre-spaceflight civilizations. We saw what you did: enslavement, extermination, forced assimilation. We realized that if you found us at the wrong stage of our development, we might not survive. So we made a choice. You faked your extinction, Tae-sung said. We chose survival, Dr. Bora corrected. We could have fought. Our military was strong, but a galactic war would have cost trillions of lives, human and non-human. We decided we would rather disappear than become what we hated. Tae-sung felt something cold settle in his stomach. His entire life he had been taught that the Valthesian Empire was built on honor and respect for the lost humans. Now he understood the truth. The Empire existed because humanity had considered it too dangerous to engage with. You've been watching us, he said. For 300 years. Every moment, Dr. Bora confirmed. We have observers throughout your territory. Some are hidden sensors. Others are agents living among you. That's impossible, one of Tae-sung's aides protested. We would have detected them. Dr. Bora smiled. Would you? Tell me, have you ever met a Valthesian who seemed a bit odd? Who asked unusual questions? Who was interested in military technology or government policy? The aide fell silent. Tae-sung thought of colleagues he had known over the years. People he had never suspected. The idea that humans had infiltrated the Empire so thoroughly was terrifying. Why didn't you destroy us? Tae-sung asked. If you've had this capability for centuries, you could have eliminated the Empire. Because that would make us like you, Dr. Bora said simply. We didn't hide to become conquerors. We hid to become better. We spent 300 years building a civilization based on principles we could be proud of. Democracy, individual liberty, scientific advancement without military application. We swore we would never repeat the mistakes that almost destroyed old Earth. Hee-jin touched Tae-sung's arm gently. Come, there's more to see. They walked through the city and Tae-sung saw the reality of human civilization. Parks filled with families. Universities where students debated philosophy. Hospitals using medical technology that could cure diseases the Empire still struggled with. Markets where people from different human worlds traded goods and ideas. This was not a military state preparing for war. This was a society that had truly moved beyond conflict. In a memorial park, they found a statue of a woman holding a child, both looking toward the stars. The inscription read, For those who stayed, we will never forget. My grandmother's name is on that wall, Hee-jin said quietly. She was a doctor. She volunteered to stay on Mars Colony to maintain the hospitals during the collapse. She sent my mother away with the evacuation fleet. My mother was 6 years old. She never saw her grandmother again. Tae-sung had no words. What could he say to that sacrifice? As the sun set over New Terra, Yejin took them to an observation deck overlooking the city. The lights below sparkled like stars. Why show us all this? Taesung asked. Why not just destroy my ship and keep your secret? Because secrets always come out, Yejin said. And because Captain Jiwoo believes you're different. She thinks you might help prevent a war. A war? Taesung turned sharply. Your people want war with the Empire? No, Yejin said. But your people might want war with us. When you report this discovery, how will your government react? Will they welcome humanity's return? Or will they see us as a threat to their power? Taesung thought of the High Council. He thought of the military leaders and the politicians who had built their careers on managing human technology. He thought of the economic systems that depended on salvaging human artifacts. Some will want peace, he said slowly, but others will see you as a threat. They'll argue that humanity will want revenge for the past. They'll say you're too powerful, too advanced. They'll want to strike first. Then you understand our problem, Yejin said. We don't want to conquer you, but we won't let you attack us either. We've prepared for this day for 3 centuries. Our defensive satellites aren't just weapons. They're a message. We can defend ourselves. You could do more than defend, Taesung said. You could destroy the Empire. But we won't, Yejin insisted. Because that's not who we are. We left that path behind 300 years ago. We're hoping your people can make the same choice. That night, Taesung lay awake in his quarters thinking about everything he had seen. The Empire was built on a foundation of lies. Humanity had not failed and fallen. They had chosen to leave. They had judged the galaxy and found it wanting. And now they had returned, more advanced and more principled than ever. The question was simple but terrifying. What would the Empire do with this knowledge? And could Taesung prevent the disaster he saw coming? He thought of the names on the memorial wall. 3 billion people who had died so humanity could survive. He thought of Hyejin's grandmother, staying behind while her granddaughter escaped. He thought of the society he had seen, peaceful, advanced, and strong enough to defend itself. The Valthesian Empire faced a choice. They could accept humanity as equals and learn from them, or they could try to destroy this civilization before it became a threat. Taesung knew which choice his government would make, and he knew he had to find a way to stop them. Part 1. The Discovery Commander. Taesung stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, staring at the holographic display with confusion. The readings made no sense. His ship had been exploring the outer reaches of charted space for 6 months, searching for salvage and resources. What they found instead was something that should not exist. Commander, I'm picking up electromagnetic signatures from the system ahead, said the sensor officer, her scaled fingers dancing across the console. The patterns match old human technology, but the output levels are far beyond anything in our records. Taesung felt his chest tighten. Humans, the species that had vanished 300 years ago in the Great Collapse. The Valthesian Empire had risen from the ashes of humanity's extinction, using their abandoned technology to build a civilization that now spanned 200 star systems. Every Valthesian child learned about the humans in school, the brilliant but fragile species that had reached for the stars and failed. It must be old ruins, Taesung said, though doubt crept into his voice. Perhaps an automated system still running after all these centuries. But as the Eternal Vigil moved closer to the system, the sensors revealed something impossible. 7 planets showed signs of habitation. Space stations orbited 3 of them. Massive shipyards hung in the darkness between worlds. And dozens of satellites turned their attention toward the Valthesian vessel, locking on with targeting systems that made the ship's threat indicators scream warnings. Commander, we're being hailed, the communications officer reported, his voice trembling. Audio and visual. The signal is strong and clear. On screen, Taesung ordered. The holographic display shifted and a face appeared. It was human, unmistakably human. A woman with dark eyes and black hair pulled back in a military style. She wore a uniform that looked both familiar and alien, with insignia that Taesung did not recognize. Unidentified vessel. This is Captain Jiwoo of the Terran Concordat Defense Force, commanding the patrol ship Defiant Dawn, the woman said, her voice calm but firm. You have entered restricted space. Power down your weapons immediately and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Taesung could only stare. The bridge fell silent. Every member of his crew had frozen, unable to process what they were seeing. A human, a living human, speaking with authority. commanding a warship. This cannot be real, whispered the sensor officer. Captain Jiwoo's expression hardened. I will not repeat myself. Power down your weapons now, or we will interpret your presence as hostile. Taesung found his voice. Captain Jiwoo, I am Commander Taesung of the Valthesian Empire. We did not know this system was inhabited. We mean no harm, but you must understand. We believed your species was extinct. Jiwoo's eyebrows rose slightly. Extinct? Is that what you tell yourselves? She paused, then continued. You're Valthesian. Your empire built itself on the ruins of our old colonies, didn't it? Using our technology, claiming to be the caretakers of humanity's legacy. The accusation stung because it was true. Taesung had always felt uncomfortable with that narrative, even as a loyal officer of the empire. Yes, he admitted, but we honored your memory. We preserved what we could of your culture. How kind, Jiwoo said, her tone dry. Commander, you have two options. You can power down and allow us to escort you to a neutral meeting point, or you can attempt to leave. I should warn you that 6 more ships are currently surrounding your position. You won't make it to the jump point. Taesung checked his sensors. She was right. 6 vessels had appeared on his screens, moving with speed and precision that his ship could not match. They had been outmaneuvered before the conversation even began. We will comply, Taesung said. We wish to understand. If humanity survived, we need to know how and why. Jiwoo nodded. Then follow my ship. And Commander, keep your weapons offline. My people have long memories and we're not interested in repeating old mistakes. The eternal vigil followed the defiant dawn deeper into the system. Taesung watched through the viewports as they passed the inhabited worlds. Cities glittered on the surfaces below. Orbital platforms stretched for kilometers. Transport ships moved between planets in organized traffic patterns. This was not a struggling remnant of a lost civilization. This was a thriving society. How many? Taesung asked quietly. How many humans are there? Jiwoo's image remained on the screen. She seemed to consider whether to answer. 40 billion across 12 systems. We call ourselves the Terran Concordat. We've been here for 3 centuries building our civilization while the rest of the galaxy thought we were dead. But the Great Collapse, Taesung said. Every human colony in known space went dark simultaneously. The electromagnetic pulses, the destroyed infrastructure. Billions died. Billions stayed behind, Jiwoo corrected. They sacrificed themselves to maintain the illusion, to give the rest of us time to escape and hide. The weight of her words settled over the bridge. Taesung thought of the memorials on SciFiPrime, the monuments to the fallen human species. They had mourned humanity while building an empire on their graves. And all along humans had been watching from the darkness. Why? Taesung asked. Why hide? Why not fight? Jiwoo was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried old pain. Because we saw what your people and others like you were doing. Expanding without mercy, enslaving pre-spaceflight species, exterminating those who resisted. We could have fought. We might have won, but at what cost? How many billions would have died in a galactic war? We chose survival over glory. We chose to disappear and rebuild somewhere you would never find us. Until now, Taesung said. Until now, Jiwoo agreed. The question is, Commander, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you report to your empire that humanity has returned? And if you do, will they see us as long-lost friends or as a threat to everything they've built? Taesung had no answer. He thought of the High Council on SciFiPrime. He thought of the military leaders who had built careers on managing human artifacts. He thought of the history books that would need to be rewritten and the political power that would shift. I don't know, he admitted. But you've let me see your worlds. You could have destroyed my ship. You didn't. We're not killers, Jiwoo said. We never were. That's why we left. But make no mistake, Commander. We will defend ourselves if we must. We've had 300 years to prepare. Your weapons are built from our old designs. Ours have evolved far beyond what you can imagine. The defiant dawn led them to a space station hanging between 2 planets. It was smaller than the others, clearly designed as a neutral meeting point. You'll dock here, Jiwoo instructed. Bring no weapons. I'm offering you a chance to see New Terra, our capital world, to understand what we've built. Then you can return to your empire and tell them whatever you wish. But you'll tell them the truth, that humanity not only survived but thrived. And we did it without conquering anyone. Taesung looked at his crew. They looked back at him with fear and wonder in their eyes. This was the most important decision of his life. What he did next would shape the future of two civilizations. I accept, he said. I want to understand. I need to see what you've built. Jiwoo smiled for the first time. Then welcome Commander Taesung to the Terran Concordat. We have a lot to show you.